Earlier this month, on November 1st, 2019, Blizzard President J. Allen Brack took the stage to address what happened with Blitzchung, a Hearthstone pro player who was suspended after he spouted a catchphrase used during Hong Kong protests when he was being interviewed after a Grandmasters tournament victory. And many agree that Brack's apology, while there were a lot of words that were said, none of it really meant all that much. He apologized for moving too quickly, but not for punishing Blitzchung. He talked about how actions matter more than words, and yet failed to actually do any sort of actions that suggest that Blizzard is learning from their mistakes. So it was just a whole lot of nothing. And during the build-up towards BlizzCon, we have seen a number of entities protest, from employees to human rights advocacy groups, to gamers and forums and communities, you name it. Now, another individual who has taken to expressing disapproval of Blizzard's recent actions is none other than Jeff Kaplan, who many of you will recognize as the director of Overwatch. And he recently spoke to the Washington Post, relayed his sentiments on the whole situation, and PC Gamer took those quotes and put them together here in this article. So the headline by itself already says volumes. Jeff Kaplan wants Blitzchung's punishment reduced more or eliminated, which I feel is the general sentiment amongst most people who have been keeping track of this situation. So this is a quote from Kaplan. He said, "I'm obviously a huge supporter of free speech. It's something that's very important to me. It got to me personally. I think the punishment was too harsh, and I was greatly relieved when they gave his money back. I think that was extremely important. Indeed, when Blitzchung was first punished, he was suspended for a whole year, and his winnings were taken away, which was utterly ridiculous. It was only after the backlash that Blizzard decided, oh crap, we need to reverse our decision a little bit, give the money back, and then we'll reduce the sentence by 6 months. So Blitzchung is still suspended for 6 months, but for an esports pro player, 6 months is still a lot. And Blitzchung, what he did, all he did was kind of say something for like a couple seconds. Something obviously that's political, but also it was related to human rights and democracy. He just said, freedom for my country. And most feel as though that shouldn't constitute a 6-month suspension, let alone a year and the taking away of prize money. So giving back the money, yes, I think that was important, and I do agree that that's a good move, but they need to retract the punishment much further. Kaplan continued right here. He expressed to Washington Post that he does indeed feel as though Blizzard moved far too quickly. So this is something that J. Allen Brack expressed as well, that Blizzard moved too quickly. Now, Jeff Kaplan isn't saying that the only thing that's wrong about this is that Blizzard moved too quickly. He's also saying that the punishment is too harsh, whereas J. Allen Brack only apologized for moving too quickly. He didn't mention Blitzchung, the Grandmasters tournament, the punishments that were levied in any way, and he didn't actually take any actions that suggested Blizzard would do better from here on out, or that Blizzard was regretful for how this whole situation played out. Now, on the topic of moving too quickly, Jeff Kaplan talked about how he's actually been involved in issuing bans and all that. And according to PC Gamer's paraphrasing of what he said, quote, he's regularly involved in determining bans and suspensions for Overwatch League players who break the rules, he said, and said the process of determining punishment usually takes 4 or 5 days. It's hard for me to think that how fast Blitzchung was punished had nothing to do with Blizzard's relationship with China and the way the Chinese government is heavily against anyone speaking out against the country. Especially when the tournament itself, it's hosted in Taiwan, and Blitzchung is someone from Hong Kong, and there's just a whole political aspect to that. I'm wondering if all of this would have taken place in America, would Blizzard have moved that quickly? If Blitzchung wasn't a Hong Kong player, would Blizzard have moved so quickly? Or would they have actually taken, a couple days to look at the situation? and determine the appropriate punishment. Just look at how the US college players were treated. When they held up that sign saying support Hong Kong, boycott Blizzard, Blizzard actually took a couple days before they finally decided, okay, let's ban the US college players. There was clearly a discrepancy between how fast and how harshly Blitzchung was treated versus how slowly and more considerately the US college players were treated when they both basically did the same thing, express support for Hong Kong protests. Jeff Kaplan continued with this quote, "There was always a group of us involved in deciding what the punishment should be, and we would heavily devil's advocate every part of the decision. So I was actually shocked that such a harsh penalty was levied." Yeah, you and me both. And the rest of the gaming community were also pretty shocked as well. The immediacy of the punishment on top of the harshness, it was just something you would see in an authoritarian government system like China. It felt like Blizzard was kind of being puppeteered by China in that moment. And so that's why the narrative out there right now is that Blizzard is very much capitulating to the Chinese government and the Chinese market. And then finally, Jeff Kaplan concluded with this statement, "I think as individuals, we all have very different feelings about what happened in regards to the Hearthstone tournament and Blitzchung. There's a lot of very different reactions among all of us." Indeed, there are some people who feel as though Blitzchung's punishment was justified because a Blizzard tournament isn't a place to get political. Others believe that J. Allen Brack's apology was appropriate. I, for one, wholeheartedly disagree with all that. I think that Blitzchung wasn't disruptive enough in what he did to constitute such a harsh punishment. Even 6 months, again, is too harsh, if you ask me. And I believe that J. Allen Brack ultimately said nothing. Ultimately apologized for nothing. And simply opened up with a statement and then followed that up with, "By the way, here's Diablo 4, just to sort of distract people away from the issue. And I think it was effective. A lot of people, I think, have moved on, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But this is Jeff Kaplan's take on the situation. A lot of what he said I agree with, and I think this guy has more balls than the Blizzard president himself. I'm glad that he's kind of speaking his mind. And beyond Jeff Kaplan, we saw before how a number of Blizzard employees expressed support for Blitzchung and dissented against Blizzard's decision. So there's this plaque in Blizzard's headquarters that reads, "Every voice matters." This is something that was highlighted as hypocritical when this whole situation played out, and employees covered this up in protest, which I think is very appropriate and very poetic. And then a number of Blizzard employees, like 30 of them, walked out and expressed support for Blitzchung. And on top of that, a number of employees actually spoke to news outlets to express their sentiments in anonymity as to not compromise their position at Blizzard. And yeah, they said all manner of things, talking about how this whole situation sucks, but also not surprising given that there's a lot of money at stake for Blizzard in China. So yeah, just all around, Blizzard is facing protest from within and from outside. And I don't know if this is going to continue, if this situation is something that people will keep talking about in the months to come, or if it will fade in the background as Blizzard wants this situation to. But it's good to see that even Blizzard employees have a say in all of this. J. Allen Brack himself also had his own responses to give in regards to this whole situation. He told PC Gamer, for example, and I covered this before, that they're not going to repeal the punishments against Blitzchung or the casters. He talked about how people can say whatever they want on social media, just not on official Blizzard events. We do know this is false, given that there is this Overwatch coach who tweeted support for Blitzchung and protested against Blizzard and was forced to delete that tweet. He talked about how the contents of Blitzchung's message were no factor at all, which I think is BS. I think if Blitzchung would have spoken out about LGBTQ or climate change, we wouldn't be seeing this situation play out. But on top of this, J. Allen Brack also talked with news outlet GameSpot, and the outlet now recently released the full transcript of that interview, and there are a couple of excerpts that I'd like to highlight to convey where J. Allen Brack stands in all of this. So the interview began with the following question. So you started BlizzCon 2019 by making another statement about what was going on over the last month. Can you talk about why it was important to start off the show by addressing what occurred with Blitzchung and the recent Freedom Hong Kong protests? Brack responded with, I think it's probably not a secret that it's been a hard month for Blizzard. It's been a hard month for the community, and it's been a hard month for the employees. Yeah, it's also been a hard month for the pro player and the pro casters who were suspended from Grandmasters for doing something that doesn't warrant such a harsh punishment. You've compromised their livelihoods. They're having a tough month too. Why don't you ever mention that? I think there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation and challenges that everyone has had to go through. So frankly, we never had a conversation saying that we weren't going to take a moment to talk about it, because to not at least have a really straightforward conversation with our community would have appeared extremely tone-deaf in my mind. What straightforward conversation? Nothing about your apology was straightforward. Nothing about the statements that you've put out there, the PR stuff, was straightforward. So it's the right thing to do, and obviously we felt very strongly that we had to. Otherwise, it would have been hanging over us for the rest of the show. It feels to me like Brack is really patting himself on the back, like he did this glorious thing. But again, when you apologize and ultimately say nothing, you've done nothing. You might as well have not given the statement at all. Frankly, it would have maybe been less insulting to just say nothing instead of giving out a statement that takes everyone for fools. Next question. Following your BlizzCon statement, there were people online who felt you didn't say enough, specifically to directly address Blitzchung directly. Do you have any comments about that? Brack responded, I haven't actually read or seen the criticisms from what was said this morning at this time. Very early on, one of the first conversations when we made our statement was about walking back the penalty and restoring his winnings. We actually had a personal conversation with Blitzchung and we apologized to him for how this had gone. No one was happy with how we ended up here. This statement was more about what everyone was thinking, what everyone read, and what everyone has heard about the situation. We sort of had to reset and readdress what our values were about that have somehow been lost. That overall narrative about what really happened had sort of been lost in the last month. Readdressing your values has no meaning if you can't show through your actions that you're willing to uphold said values. You can repeat that we value freedom of expression all you want, but if you don't show that through the way you and your company carry yourselves, then nobody's going to believe you. And that's the thing about the apology, it did not feel genuine at all. By Brack's own admittance, this statement was more about what everyone was thinking, but that doesn't matter because we're not the ones who were victimized by Blizzard. It was Blitzchung and the casters, and we're just waiting to see how Blizzard reacts to the situation, whether they do the right thing here. We shouldn't be the concern. Blizzard should be concerning itself with ensuring that Blitzchung and the casters are treated fairly, and in turn, ensure that pro players moving forward, are treated fairly, and that Blizzard actually stands for values such as every voice matters. Moving on, Brack was asked if he empathizes with people who have voiced their concerns, and Brack said that every voice in our community matters. He wasn't unhappy with employees even expressing themselves following what happened with Blitzchung. From there, this question was asked. There have been some concerns about Blizzard having less autonomy. A common concern expressed online is how much influence China is having on the company when it pertains to game development and community outreach. So basically, GameSpot is asking how much influence does China have in your day-to-day decision-making. The response GameSpot got was this. This has actually been a thing that I think has been a little confusing for me and certainly for a lot of Blizzard employees as well. I also think there's a lot of confusion around our relationship in China and sort of the laws and practices there. It is against the regulations for us to solely publish our games in China. We must, by law, have a partner, and so we have a partner that we have been in business for more than 10 years called NetEase. We think they are a very good partner, but they are the publisher of our games in China. Blizzard is not legally allowed to do a lot of the publishing activities, and it is a requirement that the partner does that. So the Weibo post, China's most popular blogging site, is a prime example of that. So Hearthstone has its own official Weibo page, and the post is the one that said, "We will protect China's pride," and all that. The Hearthstone channel on Weibo is run by the publisher NetEase. It is operated by them. When they ran that statement on Weibo, it was not a statement that they asked us about. It's not a statement that we believe in, nor is it a statement that we would have approved. So that's sort of being lost here when it comes to the controversy. Well, here's the thing. As soon as the Weibo post began to make the rounds, Blizzard never came out through official channels to say, hey, whoa, this is a post we don't approve of. We condemn what's being said here. We apologize for this. Nothing of the sort was said. So it's only now that we're hearing from J. Allen Brack that this was something they did not approve. And even then, Blizzard can't just shift all the blame to NetEase in China, given that it was Blizzard's decision to partner up with NetEase. Like, just because you signed a deal with the devil doesn't mean the devil's to blame for all the mishaps. You signed that deal. So you have to take responsibility for the actions that the China publisher takes on behalf of your company and your products. GameSpot then asked, sure, but do you still feel that Blizzard should have done a lot better following this controversy? After this happened, has there been an internal examination of your process of handling conflicts at Blizzard? If so, what has changed since then? In response, J. Allen Brack gave some generic response about how Blizzard has a culture of learning, how they acted too quickly, how they'll do better, the usual boilerplate PR stuff. He says right here that the only consideration he's giving to this whole circumstance is whether the rules were clear enough and whatnot, but I don't think there should be a rule against someone just saying, liberate my country, briefly for a couple seconds. To close this interview, GameSpot asked, how do you feel about Blizzard going forward from here? J. Allen Brack once again said that he hasn't read any of the responses, but then he said, I feel like a lot of love and time went into the opening statement. Really? Yeah, I'm sure every word was scrutinized for PR purposes, but we felt nothing genuine out of it, or a lot of us, I felt, didn't. And then he said, we wanted to say, hey, let's have a great hour of all your favorite games and all of your favorite franchises. So this once again highlights the fact that the goal with this statement wasn't to actually address the issue. It was to distract people. To say something that resembles a sorry and then say, but Diablo 4. And yeah, I guess that kind of worked, because a lot of people, I think, have moved on from the Blitzchung situation, which is exactly what Blizzard and Activision hoped for. So I guess that's one way the statement proved effective. But there are also plenty of people who just aren't buying any of this. So that's J. Allen Brack's statements and take on this whole situation. For my part, everything he says feels sugar-coated. Whereas Jeff Kaplan actually feels like he is saying something tangible, something honest, and something that I agree with, so that there may be a bias there on my part. But these are one man's take on this whole situation. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on Jeff Kaplan's take, as well as what J. Allen Brack told GameSpot during that interview in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.